What's up, guys? The summer 2023 anime season is coming to a close, and my gosh, was it a season full of mixed emotions, quality, and unfortunately, is a season where we've seen a really big gap between the good and the bad. We had everything from slice of life, action, and more, including such titles as The Way of the Cat Husband, Cyberhunk 2077, That Time I Got Reincarnated with Edie, Short Stacks Deserve Love Too, Harry Potter with Reversies, Bunny Girl Senpai Can't Get Enough of My Carrots, In Another World with My Condom Dispensary, This Is a Mom. That's it, that's the title. This thing birthed something. The Girl I Like Needs to Glue on Her Glasses, and the untitled show about a studio parodying themselves in the form of a production hell. Jokes aside, after watching 40 of the season's offering, I am here to give you guys my top 10 anime of the season. So if you don't want to watch all 40 of those shows, at least you'll get from me if it's something worth watching or not. So let's jump into it. Kicking things off with number 10, I have Level 1 Demon Lord and One Room Hero. This show was an absolute surprise for me. Honestly, coming into it, my expectations was a goofy little shenanigans show about a demon lord hanging out with the hero inside of a small apartment. But in actuality, the comedy wasn't really the focal point for me for the most part. I mean, yes, there was some really good laughs here and there. Instead, it was like this wholesome experience of this hero that once saved the world, now just kind of a reject of society. And ultimately, where all of the other members of the hero party went, and how ultimately, unfortunately, society kind of pushes them back together despite the fact that they're not wanting to be reunited in those particular terms. It's a show that had a lot of heart to it and a lot of more slice of life, even though it's in the fantasy realm, than I was really expecting. Has a really great cast of characters, including Mao, which was just a bundle of fun, Max, who was just kind of a nasty person, but at the same time, slowly over time, gaining some sort of purpose, Leo, who's fighting against society itself, and Fred, who's kind of wrapped up in it. It all led up to a really fantastic conclusion that honestly got me a little emotional. Moving on to my number 9, if you asked me if the Masterful Cat is Depressed Again Today would end up on a top 10 list for me before the season started, I would have told you no way in hell. Honestly, and if you asked me at the first episode, I would say no way in hell. This is a series that, unfortunately being done by Gohans, didn't leave a good first impressions. The first episode was seemingly almost 50% of it was just establishment shots done with CGI environments. It was god-awful. But, after the first episode, they chilled out on that stuff. A lot of the focus came in on the actual thing that it's actually supposed to be adapting, this manga about this lady and her cat. And my gosh, was this show super, super wholesome, full of heart. I absolutely loved it. Every single episode that I watched of this show, I was just smiling from ear to ear. It's just one of those shows that just, you love seeing these two characters together. This cat that, like I joked about before, is pretty much a house husband. This cat was taken in by this lady, and he spends most of his time just taking care of her, cleaning the house, cooking her food, waiting for her to come home, always worrying about her. And then yes, when she finally comes home, she's tired from her work and she's a slob, but it seems like every time that she commends the cat loves it. He's just super happy. She says she likes the food. He's over there just kind of snickering to himself and his tail's wagging. It is just super, super cute. Easily its weakest link was really when the characters are separated, whenever you have Saku going to work. Now there's some comedy there in the idea that everybody thinks that Saku is a great cook, but even though the fact that the cat's making it, and she has to lie about the fact that she's, having the cat make it, and additionally that she's a good cook because nope, she doesn't want anybody to think that she has a husband. But I think its charm really comes around the chemistry between the lady and her cat. I did enjoy her coworker and the daughter and getting into that family and going to the birthday party, but again, for the most part, this is all about the chemistry of the characters, and I think it's a really solid series that, yes, again, just get past that first episode if it's really off-putting to you, because it actually turned out to be a real treasure of the season. Masterful Cat is Depressed Again Today, which I still believe was never depressed. Moving on to my number 8, The Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts has finally come to conclusion after 2 cours. Yes, this show honestly was very up and down for me. A series that truly early on, I really enjoyed it, but then it started getting into this pattern. A pattern of this idea of this girl who was sent off to the Beast Kingdom, was then eventually captured the heart of the king himself, becomes the king's bride, even though she is human, and then over time, it's really this human girl trying to win over the hearts of people that don't want the king to be with her. And again, it got into kind of a pattern, which, yes, some people might not be bothered by, but for me personally, it got a little annoying, the idea that here's a new person that doesn't like her, and then she wins over their hearts, and then everybody's happy. Next episode, same thing over and over again. But there was a lot of stuff mixed in here that I really, really liked. I absolutely loved Lante. I think that story was fantastic. The Cat Princess was a great episode as well. it got into some really cool moments in the later part where you had a lot of people trying to overtake the throne. So ultimately, the show does turn into something really great. I really like the chemistry of the characters. I think Sari and Lionheart is just a fantastic pair. And overall, it looked really great, and in the end was a really impactful show, despite, yes, having a little bit of a formula that it starts to build up over time. Any other plus side, it does look like it's complete. Had a conclusive ending, so I'm not sure if there's anything else for it to actually tell, but yeah, definitely give Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts a shot. Moving on to my number 7, it's time for all the shonen fans to get angry at me. I'm used to it, don't worry. Yes, my number 7 is Bleach, 1000-Year Blood War, The Separation. Honestly, I have always loved Bleach. It's easily one of my favorite shonens of all time. I do love the characters. I think Ichigo is easily, without a doubt, for me, the best shonen protagonist ever. He's a very no-nonsense character. Unfortunately, this core, there wasn't really much Ichigo to begin with. But still, yes, this series is continuously ramping up. I think the fight scenes themselves are fantastic. I think the studio is doing a phenomenal job, despite the fact there is a certain group of people that are being super negative to the animators. I think it looks fantastic. The style is great as ever. And a lot of the fights have been really fantastic. I think especially the fight with Kenpachi was just great. I love seeing Rukia come back. All that stuff was really fantastic. But I will admit that I'm at this point now with this story and this series that I just kind of shrug at the overall story. I don't really get where it's going. Well, I get where it's going, but at the same time, it's not really impressing me at all. It's just a show that I'm enjoying watching just for the fights themselves. I don't really care for the overall story so far. I'm hoping eventually it hooks me, but there's just too much like, why is this person doing this? Why is this person after this? And I'm hoping eventually that stuff kind of gets revealed, because currently, again, it's just a lot of cool fights. But I will admit that a lot of my enjoyment and a lot of the reason why it is even in my top 10 list is because I just love the series and I love the characters and I want to see where it goes from here. We're just kind of in that little middle area where things are still kind of building up. So we'll see where it goes from here, but still loving it. Moving on to my number 6, Undead Girl Murder Farce. Now, early on in the season, this was like up there. Like this was up in my list. I was just eating it all up. There was just everything about this show I was loving to death. But unfortunately, over time, it kind of came down on the top 10 list for me, but still not dropping below 6. Undead Girl Murder Farce is just a really excellent kind of mystery show with some great, phenomenal, great character chemistry. And yes, a director that just can't seem to mess things up. This is a director that has touched nothing but gold. Shogun Rokuraku Shinju, Kaguya-sama's Love is War, and he's doing it with the Undead Girl Murder Farce. This director is just phenomenal at what they do. They take a show that is, yes, mostly a lot of talking, every now and then a little bit of action bit, but takes it and makes it very artistic and constantly keeping your eyes engaged. He's very good at taking a story and really making it come to life on the screen. Though I will admit the weird pixelated stroke with green and the blurry outlines sometimes of the characters doesn't make much sense for me on an artistic standpoint, but I don't know, maybe I'm just not getting that art. But no, Undead Girl Murder Farce is the pairing of an immortal girl that has been beheaded and an Oni. A very odd couple, but at the same time, both having the same target. The guy that took the girl's body and the guy that experimented on the Oni. And what kind of turns from this is them becoming essentially detectives that go around and actually solve mysteries. And I do have to admit that there's a side of me that doesn't like the fact that a lot of the cases, the mystery sort of gets put out there a little bit too early. Like, it's almost as if the storyteller tips their hand a little too hard and it kind of makes it obvious what the conclusion is going to be. What carries it is the chemistry between the Oni and this Immortal. They're just a fantastic grouping and I love the chemistry between the two of them. The shenanigans they get into, the goofy nature of the Oni, and the more serious nature of the Immortal. It's got a crazy cast of characters that all kind of come together for all these different mysteries, and ultimately the telling of those mysteries, the telling of the solution, is what ultimately makes it really fantastic. But yeah, if you're looking for a solid mystery, a really solid storytelling, really fantastic directing, give Undead Girl Murder Farce a chance. Moving on to my number 5, I have Bang Dream, It's My Go. I was really late on picking up on this show, mainly because I figured it was a sequel to the original Bang Dream, which it technically is, but doesn't really necessarily require you to watch it. But this series definitely turned out to be a huge surprise for me. A series that I had no expectations going into it. I figured it was going to be just a band show. But at its core, there was one thing that makes this a number 5, and almost perfect amidst everything else that sort of stains it. And that is Tomori the main vocalist of the series. Tomori's story in Bang Dream It's My Go is absolutely fantastic. It's essentially a girl that is special. She's sort of an outsider. She doesn't really connect with people very well. She has trouble speaking. She's very much kind of like an introvert. Somebody that's unable to express or vocalize anything they want or are feeling, and instead writes it down in her notebooks. And then one day this girl finds those books and decides to compose them into music, and thus becomes the method in which Tomori is able to actually speak her mind. She vocalized it on the stage as a vocalist. And while unfortunately that band fell apart, eventually it's being brought back together by different individuals trying to restore the band. But unfortunately that's where I get into my major warning for a lot of people. If you don't like melodrama, this is where we get into the melodrama of this series. I didn't really care much for any of the other characters surrounding Tomori, but still for me it was always carried by Tomori. I really loved her story and I wanted to root for her. I wanted her to bring people together and I wanted her to be happy. In the end, the music's fantastic. Even though it's CGI, it was really presented well. The emotion in the characters is really expressive. And ultimately, it came down to being a show that, despite its flaws, despite these characters being a little bit too much, I really, really did enjoy it. But yeah, if you're looking for a really fantastic band show, give it a shot. Moving on to my number 4, which used to be my number 1. My Happy Marriage. This show is so dang good. It is such a fantastic show. It essentially follows this girl, Mio, and she unfortunately is treated terribly by her family until one day she's wed off to a guy who is seen as being really cold to women, one that drove off his last fiance. But since Mio has had a terrible life, she didn't really question any of it. She followed her orders and went off to her new husband and immediately fell in love with him. But yes, this man, Kuro, is a very cold man, but at the same time, he does take care of her. What underlines this story about somebody who has had nothing and was treated terribly now being with somebody that is, yes, cold, but not harming her, is a subplot about different families, different bloodlines, and the different supernatural abilities they have. Yes, early on, the driving force for the show is just a lot of that trauma and the depression that Mio is facing. Somebody that, again, has been treated so terribly her whole life and doesn't even understand the concept of family. At the same time, Kudo discovering, what the hell happened to this girl? Why was she so mistreated despite the fact that she's from a prominent family? It's a really great story that was beautifully portrayed. I mean, this is probably easily one of the most beautiful shows of the season by far. Though I will admit the only stain that the series really has is that the final couple episodes was just kind of overly predictable. You kind of knew exactly what was going to happen before you even got there. I'm really, really happy this show is getting a second season. I really can't wait to see where it goes from here, but just a very beautiful love romance supernatural show that I highly recommend people check it out. Moving on to my number 3. Yes, Fate Strange Fake. It was technically a summer show, and so I was about to forget about it, but then I noticed it and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That was a summer show. It just it just aired like right when the season started, and can't forget about that show. The Fate Strange Fake was a phenomenal show, at least Whispers of Dawn, and I cannot wait for the TV series to come out. As I kind of mentioned with my review when the series first aired way back then, I absolutely love the theme and the feel of the show. It reminds me so much of Fate Zero, a modern day fantasy show with just people kind of backstabbing each other, assassinating each other, all this kind of stuff happening, and just crazy epic battles amidst everything. Narita, the writer who did Bacano and Durarara, is just so good with so many characters that every single one of them, I want to see what they do next. Honestly, I think the only character I wasn't really intrigued by whatsoever was probably Fat, but I'm sure that they're going to do something really cool with him. I've heard nothing but good things about the source material, and I was really happy that this one episode, this first airing, did so well and it intrigued me so much that I just cannot wait for more of it. It looks fantastic. The characters are fantastic, besides Flat, and the storytelling is just so good. I cannot wait to see what each of these factions do and how they turn the tables on each other. Then we get into my number 2. Honestly, number 2 and number 1 were fighting with each other all the way into the end. I honestly fought. I kept switching back and forth, but ultimately, after doing my review of number 1 and realizing how much I loved it, I decided number 2 will be Bungo Stray Dogs Season 5. I really, really, really love Bungo Stray Dogs. The series is absolutely phenomenal. If you have not even touched anything Bungo Stray Dogs, please go watch it. It is the series that I see as being one of the greatest series of all time, but is unfortunately not really viewed by many people. Like, I barely see anybody talking about this series, even though every time I watch an episode, I'm just floored by it. Now, I will admit, and this is another reason why this is number 2, there was some plot points in Season 5 that I wasn't too happy about. I think ultimately, in the end, I was satisfied with how it concluded, but there was a few points in this season where I'm like, I just don't think this is working for me. but ultimately everything around it still works. What makes Bungo Stray Dogs ultimately so fantastic for me is that there's a massive cast of characters, but not just having characters for the sake of just having a lot of characters. Every single one of these characters is so beautifully written. They have their own driving forces. They change their minds. They backstab each other. They change alliances. They sometimes go back alliances. There's just back and forth between each of them. There's all these different factions. They all have their driving force. They all have their leadership. And it all comes together so beautifully. Every time it switches to a random character, I'm not thinking, holy crap, I don't really like this character. No, I immediately think, oh, this is this character and their alliance to this, and they've gone through this whole thing, and I just want to see what they think about the situation. That's a sign of some really great characters, when you want to know what everybody thinks about the situation. And that's what they do so well with the story. It's unfortunately caught up with the manga. They say there's more coming. I'm not really sure what that means, but I just can't get enough of Bungo Stray Dogs. I highly, highly, highly suggest checking out the series. It's just that good. And yes, it's visually fantastic, and the animation's fantastic, and the character designs are fantastic. Just, there's nothing wrong with this show. And that brings us to number 1. Drum roll. Surprise to nobody. If anybody knows me, they're already like, we already know what you're going to say. Don't even bother delaying it or anything. Yes, my number 1 for the summer 2023 anime season is easily, by far, without competition, Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation 2nd season. Now, I will say that there was a few things that was going to knock this down on my list down into the second mark, and a lot of that stuff, honestly, is driven by my knowledge of the novel itself. And I really had to take a moment to kind of sit back, do my actual anime review where I focused in on the anime itself and really critiqued it and looked at and analyzed it and what it kind of provided, that I finally decided to myself, despite the fact that I have my misgivings for how the anime adaptation handled it, and yes, some drop in quality from the first season, there's no doubt that despite those issues, it's still just a level above everything else. There's nothing that really, honestly, for me, compares to what Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation does for me. It is just a phenomenal series that just has a massive cast of characters, each and every single one of them being amazing character studies. And yes, at its core, at its heart, is Rudius, who is, for all accounts, a nasty individual that is slowly learning purpose and growing up and gaining things and unfortunately losing things, falling down into depression again. It is a series that tackles so many uncomfortable subjects and does it in a way that is both honest, unfiltered, not always positive, but always with purpose. It is a series that I think so many other shows are trying to copy it, but unfortunately fail to see the thing that makes it so great, and that is its flaws. It is a show that is full of flaws, flawed characters, that make you realize how believable it is because they're so flawed. Because Rudius thinks of inappropriate things, because Rudius does things that are immoral, makes you realize that he is a human that society doesn't like, but a human that society created. I love so far the journey of Rudius, and I love all the characters around him. It is such a phenomenal series, an epic series, and a series that I can't get enough of. So until spring comes around, I will anxiously wait and read the novel series. But that's it. That is my top 10 anime of the summer 2023 anime season. For my honorable mentions, I have A Girl I Like Forgot Her Glasses. I think that show is super cute, but at the same time, I hate the guy. He was just so obnoxious and just, it was very repetitive in his mind. It's like, gosh, guy, just chill. I know he's a young kid. He's going to be flustered, but he's still annoying. Yohani the Parhelion was really fantastic. I really wasn't expecting anything from that show, and it turned out to be a very beautiful show. Horimiya Peace, I just love Horimiya, so getting more Horimiya was great. Malevolent Spirits Mononogatari Part 2 was fantastic as well. Very shonen, and the quality wasn't fantastic, but I still really liked it. It's kind of like a little bit more grown-up shonen than you typically see. And finally, Sugar Apple Fairy Tale Part 2. Yes, Sugar Apple Fairy Tale actually did a lot better with his second core. It was less focused with nasty people that didn't like the main character, and it made it a lot more enjoyable. And of course, continuing shows I'm still loving. Rurouni Kenshin, Jujutsu Kaisen, obviously. Dark Gathering has been so good. If Dark Gathering was not continuing in the next season, this show would literally be up on my list. Dark Gathering is so fantastic. If you've not been watching it, oh, that show is just so freaking good. Yayoi, the main girl in that show, is such a phenomenal character. And then finally, yes, Helk. They've had a couple episodes that feel very fillerish, but I love Helk so much. I think it's just a fantastic series, and I just cannot get enough of it. And that's it. that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below, comment. Let me know what your top 10, if you can't make 10, just whatever list you could do. I know people don't watch as much shows as I do, so just give me your top whatever list. Great to hear from you guys. I love to hear back from you guys on these top lists. It's always a great way for, even if people don't like what I list, they can go down in the comments and they can see other people's lists and go, oh, okay, I'll check that out. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button to get my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top lists. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you like this content and you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate everybody does. Additionally, stick around as we go into the fall 2023 anime season. I'll be doing first impressions of every show of the season. I'll let you guys know what's in it, what to expect in it, and if it's something I'm enjoying or not. With all that said, y'all take care.